Okay. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Allison Brovman. I'm with the San Francisco Bernie Kratz. Tonight, we're going to be delving into the details of the school board recall effort and how we can all get involved to fight back. As we wait for the call to build, we'd like to acknowledge everyone tuning in with us tonight. Go ahead and put your name in the chat so we can all get acquainted and get tonight's call underway. Tell us in the chat why you decided to join us tonight, and let us know if you help share this event on your social media so we can give some shout outs later on. In just a minute, we'll kick off some talks by our speakers to discuss the top 10 reasons why San Francisco voters should vote no on the school board recalls. Each of our speakers will have a few minutes to dig into why we need to stop these school board recalls, and we'll try to answer questions as we go along. Personally, reasons I'm opposing them is because I personally feel the school board is doing exactly what they were elected to do, which is to fight for racial justice and equity across our school district, such as things like all of our students, not just the ones at schools with wealthy PTAs, can now learn music and arts again. We have wellness centers at all of our middle schools, and we have language programs like Arabic and Vietnamese, thanks to this very dedicated school board. If you're organizing here with us tonight, we hope folks will be motivated to get involved, like making phone calls, joining our All In to Defeat the Recalls lit drops every single weekend, and do whatever it takes to win this election. You can sign up here. The link is in the chat. Give that a second. And as we go into the stretch of GOTV, we can also use your support to help get that done. So if you can also donate, that link will also be in the chat. If you're joining us on Facebook tonight, you can transfer over to the Zoom room for a more interactive meeting. Just go to ourrev.us/Zoom. I'm gonna check in and give a few shout outs here. Welcome to Cameron. Thank you for voting no. Welcome to Susan Solomon, one of our dedicated teachers. Welcome to Dan from IATSE, Union Strong. Indeed. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to one of our two co-hosts for the evening. Please welcome Madi from the No School Board Recall campaign, who is going to speak to their experience as an SFUSD parent and the effect that this recall effort has had on their child and on our working families. Madi, over to you.
Thank you, Allison. It's so good to be here with all of you tonight. I'm Madi Posa, Madi M. My pronouns are they, them, and I'll be co-hosting tonight's call as we hear from our speakers on the top 10 reasons why SF voters need to vote no on these school board recalls. But first, we got to stop for a second and pause. Let's do a land acknowledgement that SFUSD school board passed in the Reclaiming American Indian Alaskan Native Resolution last January 2020. This was sponsored by Commissioner Collins, one of the recall measures who's about, and Commissioner Sanchez. For 5 years straight, the American Indian Parent Advisory Council stated the same demands every single year in a yearly report, with little or no changes from SFUSD.
Hey, everyone go upstairs, please.
Finally, Collins took notes and shared a document with the board and called into question why the American Indian Education Pact came year after year with no or little changes. Finally, a resolution authored by Commissioner Collins and Sanchez apologizing, including different reparations and district changes, like changing history books in schools and in the school district. Some of the things in the resolution have been implemented while others still have yet to implement it. This is why it's important to make sure school board members stay on the school board and say no to this recall to make sure this work continues. Beginning 2020-2021 school calendar year, the San Francisco Unified School District finally recognized and adopted the official land acknowledgement provided by the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples. It is now not only read at every school board meeting by President López, but by many other SFUSD committees. This is the official SFUSD land acknowledgement is as follows. We, the San Francisco Board of Education, acknowledge that we are on unceded, which means stolen, ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land, in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, we must recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homelands. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community and by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. This is especially important because the federal government does not recognize their sovereign rights as First Peoples to this land. Now, I'd like to introduce tonight's co-host, Brandy Markman. Brandy is the co-chair of San Francisco Bernie Rats. Take it away, Brandy.
All right. Thank you so much, Madi. Hi, everyone. I'm Brandy Markman, co-chair of San Francisco Bernie-Crats. We are proud to be an Our Revolution affiliate. Our Revolution is the largest entirely grassroots-funded progressive group in America. Last June alone, Our Revolution elected 74% of 450 elected progressive candidates, endorsed progressive candidates, by mobilizing on the ground and in the halls of power. I'm also a public school parent, so this is personal. A few months ago, San Francisco Bernie-Crats launched an education justice committee for progressive parents, families, educators, and community members. We'll discuss this at our next meeting, which is always the first Wednesday of the month, and you can find the sign-up link on our Facebook page, San Francisco Bernie-Crats Facebook page. All are welcome at our meetings. I'll be talking tonight about one of the many reasons why I'm fighting this recall, and I think it's worth that you get in the fight too. Basically what is underscoring so many of these recalls that are going on across the nation are right-wing attacks. This is a right-wing attack, but we can win. We can win. There was a recall attack on some school board members in Nebraska, and they just lost. So we can definitely do this, and we cannot fail. Steve Bannon said in a podcast in May that the way to take back the country is through school boards. And there has been a huge increase in school board recalls in 2001. I believe that usually they hover between 18 and the graph in the next slide, 18 and 38 school board recalls every year. Last year in 2021, there were 91 school board recalls across the US. So this is Steve Bannon's plan. 24 of those recalls were in California. Next slide. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Glenn Beck went on record in November 2020 suggesting it was Americans' duty to overthrow the government if the election is stolen by the Dems. And just about 2 months after the insurrection, recall leaders went on to Glenn Beck's show to try to whip up a lot of right-wing hatred against our school board commissioners. This was in March in 2001. It was about 4 months after they had moved to San Francisco from the South Bay. I'm going to talk a little bit more in the next slide about some of the people behind this. I'll wait for the slide to hopefully go up. A Republican recall lawyer is a man by the name of Jim Sutton. His firm was fined to almost $250 million when it failed to report an $800,000 campaign donation from PG&E. And you're going to hear more about how PG&E is involved in funding recall that opposed a measure that would break up PG&E, which is a monopoly. He has also taken money from, his firm has taken money from Juul, which is an e-cigarette company. It's in the next slide. That would partially overturn San Francisco city laws designed to ban the sale of vaping products. And it would also it fought age verification requirements for the e-purchase of e-cigarettes. So not really a track record here of being for the kids or for what's best for society. And in the next slide, I will talk about how he tried to repeal Indigenous Peoples Day in 2018. In 2018, a little late to the game, San Francisco finally had a resolution passed by the Board of Supervisors to repeal the, change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. He didn't like that, so he tried to repeal it. So this is someone behind the recall. And I also want to say that the entire country is watching. And should the recall succeed, the last day to vote is February 15th. The next day, it will be the lead story on right-wing media, and it will galvanize school board recall efforts all over the US. So that is, we are not just fighting for ourselves in San Francisco, but we are also fighting for other folks whose school boards and schools are under recall attack. All right, thank you so much. And now I'm going to kick it back to Madi.
Hi, everyone. So some of the reasons that I oppose the recall is I still remember the very first meeting when the commissioners who are now on the recall measures were elected officials on the school board for the very first time. I remember hearing one of the school district administrators say, well, this is not business as usual, after receiving several questions from Commissioners López and Collins. And I remember doing public comment saying, I am so glad this is not business as usual. This is a new day. Over 20 years ago, I will never forget that day in October when SFPD went in full riot gear at Thurgood Marshall and stormed into this SF high school and beat up children and teachers and did heinous acts of police brutality. I was a youth then, and I remember speaking out at hearings and school board meetings with the rally cry, no more cops in schools.
I cut them with the kid's knife.
Great. No more cops in schools. Then the school board ignored our cries. But after George Floyd was lynched, Commissioner Collins worked with the community and passed the resolution to defund the school resource officer program. And for the past 2 years, there have been no more cops assigned to our SFUSD schools. It makes me feel 40s, something that I fought as a youth and finally happened, so my Indigenous child can feel this impact. Thank you to Commissioner Collins for listening to the decades of outcry from so many Black and brown kids about defunding the police. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, both López and Collins worked to ensure that not only SFUSD got weekly food pickups, but that any child anywhere could get food from SFUSD weekly food pickups. This food was in the beginning months of the pandemic was the main source for me and my toddler, as well as many other parents. But since I'm a solo parent, I was really scared to go inside our grocery stores. I didn't know what to think. And the only way that I got food was through these SFUSD weekly food pickups that were outside. These food lines that SFUSD did were also where we got digital thermometers, free books, we got free backpacks, school supplies, and so much community info. Many, many times when we went, these were lifelines for so many single, solo, poor working class parents like myself. During the pandemic, when it was about time to do in-person learning again, it eased me as a parent. The Commissioners Collins and López both wrote the Pathway to COVID Recovery Resolution, passing that our classrooms would have HEPA purifiers and so many more things that we need to still get out of this pandemic. And as a queer parent, I wanted to remind everybody, remember when transphobic bathroom segregation as Josephine Zhao was drummed out of the 2018 school board race? Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. She's back. And so as a paid consultant for the recall campaign is paying her $111,000, which is really sad because the starting salary for an SFUSD teacher is $54,000, which is less than half of what Josephine Zhao is making on the recall campaign. This is so important to me currently right now because Commissioner Collins is sponsoring a resolution that I helped to partly co-author. Any other time, or maybe in 2 minutes, thank you, to help co-author to create the first queer trans parent advisory council in our district. And when it passes, it will be one of the first in the nation to advise their school board. Seeing queer lives saves queer lives, especially in a nation where the majority of states have active trans student bills right now. I want to make sure that when I fill out an SFUSD parent form, that my gender identity and any student's gender identity is seen and counted. When I chose an SFUSD school, I picked a school that had a language immersion program and even considered a school with a Tagalog language pathway. Commissioner Moliga wrote a 7-page resolution in collaboration with our Pacific Islander families in the district, and it created the Pacific Islander Parent Advisory Council, structural changes for PI communities, PI programs, and the very first ever Samoan language pathway for our pre-K students in SFUSD. Many forget we have infant and preschool programs in our district, but it's important to remember our public early childhood education programs. In addition, Commissioner Collins made sure that now our district has Arabic and Vietnamese language pathway programs. I am so grateful that there's another Southeast Asian language that is added to SFUSD schools. As a parent who centers racial justice in my family, I am proud that we have a school district where we have 5 official values where we live and say out: student-centered, unity, fearless, social justice, and diversity. These words spell out SFUSD. And poor working class Black and brown parents like me, we are SFUSD. And we say no, no, no to all 3 recall measures. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Madi. It's always great to hear your perspective. I know that you have really decades of experience being involved in our San Francisco public schools. Now let's bring in Oakland School Board Director from District 5, Mike Hutchinson, who's here to tell us equity or else. All right, Mike.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. And first, I want to apologize to everyone that I'm sitting here in the semi-dark, but I got caught out in other meetings and the time hit me. So first, my name is Mike Hutchinson. I am the school board director in Oakland for District 5, and I serve a part of Oakland that contains the Fruitvale neighborhood all the way up through Glenview. And I'm really honored to be here today and happy to come speak on my perspective about these recalls and kind of some of the other forces that are going into this. And so I know for me on the school board here in Oakland, I'm a newly elected school board director. I was elected in 2020. And my election here in Oakland really signified us turning a corner in terms of local and community control of our school district. For Oakland, we were taken over by the state in 2003. And when the state came and took over our school district in Oakland, they started a process of closing our traditional neighborhood schools in order to open up charter schools in their place. And during this period of state takeover, we were devastated, and it saw Oakland become the city with the highest rate of charter schools in the whole state of California. My election was really us trying to turn the corner on that. And so when I ran for school board, this was actually my 3rd attempt in running for school board, we were heavily outspent by outside billionaires who were trying to influence our election. And so I am very familiar with some of the same billionaires that are funding the recall campaign in San Francisco, because they were also heavily involved with Oakland and trying to prevent us from regaining community control. So for example, Michael Bloomberg personally spent almost $200,000 against me directly for Oakland School Board District 5 in the last election. And I can see the list of names who are investing heavily in the recall in San Francisco are these same faces that we see across the country. And to me, what it really is it is a pushback to the changes that new school board directors are trying to bring to our cities. I've known Allison Collins for quite a few years now. We first met in Sacramento when we were both asked to come and testify during appeal hearings for a charter school. And subsequently, we've gotten to know each other. I've come and spoken at a couple of school board meetings in San Francisco, and I feel very confident in saying that Allison Collins is an equity warrior. I'm very proud to say that I endorsed her in her campaign, and she endorsed me in my campaign. And what I really see happening now is a pushback to the changes your new school board directors are trying to bring to San Francisco. We have to have schools that are going to equitably serve our community and equitably distribute our resources. These are public resources, and this is our public education system. And so when we elect officials who are finally going to challenge these traditional structures that have prevented so many of us from having true access, this is the kind of pushback that unfortunately we have to face. And so hopefully everyone is going to stay strong at this time. Your school board directors were democratically elected to serve the community. And really the platforms that they ran on are now the reasons why some of these outside forces are trying to remove them from office. Because yes, people are threatened by more communities who have been traditionally marginalized getting that true access. People are threatened by true equity because unfortunately they feel like they'll have to give something up in order for our communities to gain what we should have always rightfully had. And so again, I'm as strongly as I can endorsing the current school board directors and standing against a recall election. I am very honored to have partners that I can work with in San Francisco as we try to move these very important issues forward. And as a negative cautionary tale, you know, if we let outside forces or the amount of money that somebody has dictate our local politics, we will never be able to move our cities and our communities forward. And so I think it's really a time where we draw a line in the sand. We know that the reason we elected these school board officials is the exact reason why they're being attacked by these racist recall efforts. And so there is a clear choice. Are we going to stand up and defend democracy and try to move our communities forward? Or are we going to succumb to these outside forces that have always tried to keep us in marginalized positions? So I'm very honored to be here today. I could talk forever about this, but again, I want to, as strongly as I can, encourage everyone to vote no on the recall and really stand up for our elected officials who we all worked so hard to get into these positions in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. If anybody has any responses or questions to Mike, please place them in the chat. Mike, I just wondered, what advice do you have for us as San Franciscans in fighting these recalls?
My main is to stand strong. You know, we are in these are very difficult times for us right now as we're going through a COVID pandemic. And I just want us to be very careful and be very intentional. And again, I know that the school board directors specifically were elected to bring changes to some of these traditional structures that have held us marginalized. And so, of course, the communities that feel like they've benefited from these structures feel threatened. This is really a clear choice. Are we going to stand up for democracy and stand up for creating quality public schools in every neighborhood? Or are we going to fall back and let the people with the biggest wallet dictate our policies for us?
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, and Julie Roberts-Fung says she saw you speak out powerfully in New Orleans when the same forces shut down the last public school in New Orleans, and now every school in that city is 100% charter. That school was originally the first Black public school in the New Orleans, Louisiana area, and charters closed it. That's what the charter school recall folks are spending their money for. Thank you so much, Mike. We really appreciate all that you're doing over in Oakland. Thank you so much for coming over here and being a part of the call. We appreciate you so much. And now I am going to kick it on over to Madi. Thank you so much, Mike. Is Madi here?
I'm here. Hi, everyone. Hold on one second.
That's okay. And I had forgotten to ask folks, if you have any questions for Madi, please put them in the chat. I unfortunately forgot to ask people if they have any questions or responses. They give us so much amazing information, and we really appreciate that. So it's great to have so many kids on this call too. It's wonderful. It's great to hear kids' voices. Madi, do you want me to, I know you're busy. We're all kind of busy here parenting. Would you like me to
No, I can take it away. I'm ready.
All right, go for it. Thank you.
Ready like spaghetti. So thank you so much, everyone. So okay, next, this one we have is San Francisco Public School parent. Oh, no, wait. Sorry, wrong one. Sorry. Okay, next we have is San Francisco School Board Commissioner, the amazing Allison Collins, here to tell us to stand up and to push back against all these recalls that's happening right now here in San Francisco. Commissioner Collins?
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm very grateful for all of the folks that are on the call. It's dinner time, and the fact that people are committed to having this conversation is really just really inspiring to me. I want to, talking about being on, I was a parent volunteer. I was an educator in classrooms. And because of the organizing and that I did with other families and the time that I've spent working in the district to create change, I realized that at the time that I ran, if I didn't run, that there would be things that wouldn't happen for families that I had been advocating for. And so I ran, and similarly, President López, she had to leave the classroom, something, that was really her heart and soul, but we did it out of a commitment to the communities that we serve. And we felt extremely honored when we joined the board to be able to enact changes that honestly I had been waiting for as a parent for decades. So immediately, President López, she became the first commissioner to propose legislation to support Latinx families, right? And San Francisco, with all of its rich tradition, had never really honored or acknowledged the unique needs of the Latinx community. I had children that participated in arts programs in Chinatown and had to, we were told to rent instruments, which is against the law, or we were given broken instruments. And immediately, President López and I wrote a resolution to ensure all kids in the entire district had access to music programs, and we became an arts equity district. So immediately we were able to leverage our relationships with the community and not, in a sense, give them access to our system. And in that process, co-author resolutions with a variety of communities to reflect kind of long-standing concerns that had not been addressed. And as a result, as Mike said, we're now seeing the result of that work, both in the changes that we see in the district, but also in the pushback that we're seeing externally. And we're also seeing that nationwide. So I wanted to give people kind of a larger perspective. If folks have been following what's happening with the school board, and specifically, how President López and I specifically have been targeted, it's really been a year that has been one of the hardest years outside of just the pandemic. Just the personal attacks beyond just, regular kind of controversies that you see and that we expected as school board members, the direct personal attacks on us and our families, and also on students who serve on our school board, has really been kind of mind-boggling. And as I have looked out on kind of what's been happening nationwide, I'm also seeing that across the country. In educators that have pledged to teach the truth are actually being threatened to be fired with anti-CRT legislation. And I'm seeing Black superintendents and Black principals who just basically say Black Lives Matter are being removed from their positions. And so this is system-wide. There's a purging of our public education system, and there's a real clawback that's happening as basically the kind of Stop the Steal movement has moved from the federal level to the local level and is looking to take over control, both of our education system, but just a political power in general. And so I just wanted to say, you know, from my position, I'm a volunteer. We get paid $500 a month to do a job without any staff. And it really is, if you're doing it for the right reason, it's a labor of love, but it is obviously, you know, very challenging work. And we cannot be successful if we don't have support from local community members, and we need folks to have our backs. And I've had conversations with President López about, you know, our concerns, not just for our ability to continue to do the work, but that there won't be folks who will want to follow in our footsteps in the future. Because nationally, and this is even true for just classroom educators, as folks who are, you know, real warriors for our communities of color, and folks who are really advancing racial justice, you know, take a stand. We need folks to have our backs, and we really need to look at what's happening, you know, in our nation around who's standing up and making sure that our voices are heard. So I just want to encourage you. San Francisco is unique, and there are things that we are doing here that we'd not be able to do in other parts of the country. And for that reason, we have become a target. And individually, you know, commissioners have become a target, but it's not about us. It's about what we represent. And we need all of you to get involved, and we need you to be loud and proud of the work that we have accomplished, and really fight hard for our city and for our public education system. Because if we don't act, and if we don't get engaged, and if we, you know, I've heard people say, you know, like the truth will set you free. Well, somebody has to set the truth free. Somebody has to get the word out and counter the disinformation that's out there, and counter the lies, and stand up for educators that don't have PPE and are still working in our classroom, and for students who are demanding that we fix the way that we address sexual harassment and sexual assault. And we need to stand up for Black students who are tired of dealing with racist bias in their schools, right? One of the things that I'm working on now is a result of legislation or policy that we passed in January that's considered very controversial. And the most, you know, the most important aspect of the Lowell resolution is that we establish an equity audit. And there are people actively fighting to remove me from office, in part because that will stall the work that we're doing. And they're also fighting to remove individual volunteers on the NAACP from that committee because they don't want to see it move forward. And unfortunately, because of these attacks, we cannot get students to volunteer because they don't feel safe. And I honestly don't feel that they are safe, because they've also experienced cyberbullying and personal attacks to them and their parents. So we need to form a wall like the ones we see in Seattle, you know, where you have Black Lives Matter protests and you have walls of white allies and other members like coming out to kind of block and protect. We need to start doing that online, and we need to do that in our communities. We need to, you know, like, share, support, uplift the message of folks that are, you know, anti-recall efforts, and of commissioners like us, and educators, and student organizers. And we need folks to get out the vote, make sure we're putting up window signs and dropping lit and making our voice heard in board meetings, because we have a very small minority of folks who are very well funded and well organized, and they're able to amplify their voice and we have the right, we have the truth on our side, but we won't win if we don't get active and we don't, get engaged in this fight. So I deeply appreciate those who've come out and who've been consistent in supporting me. And I will keep fighting. But we can't do it alone. We need to do it in solidarity. And we need to do it. We need to do it now. So thanks again for taking the time.
All right, thank you so much, Commissioner Collins. It was really, really wonderful hearing you. Really appreciate you, really appreciate your voice, and you are with people who stand with you. So thank you very much. We're going to be just fighting really hard this next month. And next we have San Francisco Public School parent and special education advocate Alida Fisher to discuss breaking down barriers and inclusion in our public schools. Alida, welcome.
Thank you, Brandy. Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here. As Brandy mentioned, I'm the proud parent of 3 SFUSD students and 1 graduate. All my children have IEPs, or individualized education programs, because of their learning differences. I'm active in San Francisco Unified's Community Advisory Committee for Special Education, and I'm a special education advocate by profession. So what does this recall mean for students with disabilities? Well, frankly, it scares me. Speakers before me made the connection between the recall and charter school supporters. And look, I also serve on the Charter School Oversight Committee here in SFUSD, and we're lucky to have some charters that follow our governance structure, allow their educators to join our unions. They're part of our special education local plan area. But tell me, how many of those schools have programs and special day classes for our most impacted students? How many of those charter schools have special programs for students with autism or emotional disturbance? None, actually 0. That work falls to our public schools. So many of the families with disability, families of students with disabilities here in the city rely on our public schools to get the services they should be receiving through our public health system. Unfortunately, there's just as much inequity there as there is in our schools. Right now, the wait time to receive services such as occupational therapy or mental health support through Medi-Cal funded programs is 6 months to a year. Where do our kids actually receive those services? In our public schools. For me, and many families like mine, this recall is a real distraction. We have so much work to do in our schools to address the negative impacts of the pandemic. The pandemic took an already stressed and underfunded system and pushed it towards the brink of collapse. In the past years, special education expenditures have increased 28% here in California. Both state and federal funding for special education has actually decreased when you take inflation into account. The federal law that governs special education is supposed to be funded at 40%. Right now, it's funded at less than 10%. Our advocacy should be focused on fully funding education, not fighting recalls. So this year, the theme of Inclusive Schools Week, which happened the first week of December, was rebuilding together, which for me, that's a great message that all of us in San Francisco really need to be hearing right now. This theme really exemplifies the work that President López and Commissioner Collins are doing right now. So the CAC, and I'm not here to talk on behalf of the CAC, I'm here as a parent myself, but the CAC has been focused on improving literacy rates in our district for the past decade that I've been involved with the work. As you may know, less than half of SFUSD students are reading proficiently right now. And when you take our reading rates and you break them down by socioeconomic status, by race, by ethnicity, well, then our pervasive and ongoing equity gap, it gets laid bare. This school year, President López and Commissioner Collins have authored a new resolution, Reading is Critical to Lifelong Success. This resolution is aimed at improving literacy rates in our district, not just by reviewing curriculum, but making systemic changes to screening and training practices. This resolution is already bringing people together, and it hasn't even been fully adopted. Central office staff, educators, school psychologists, family members, we're all starting to meet. We're all doing the work together that's previously been done in silos. There's a lot of great people in our district doing great things. And by working together and focusing on our students instead of recalls, we can do great things. Thank you.
All right.
Hi.
Mari.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alida. Does anybody have a question or response for Alida? If you say it in the chat, then I can read it out loud. I don't see any currently right now, but what we can do is Alida can, I guess, message back to whatever questions and answer.
Absolutely.
So move on. Thank you again so much, Alida, for all your work and saying no recalls. So now we're going to bring in Miao Lovett, who is an SFUSD parent and a legislative aide at the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and who is here to talk about how our schools need more resources and not recalls. So say it with me, everybody. Resources, not recalls. Take it away, Miao Lovett.
Thank you, Mari. Yeah, as a parent, I get that we want the best for our children. And as Alida was saying, COVID-19 has really made the disparities worse. It's true for our families and it's true for the entire school system. But the school board recall instigators have been using the pandemic to drive a wedge in our communities. Now, have you heard the line that public schools are failing us? I come from working in public education for over 20 years. And one of my favorite jobs was that first one starting a mentoring program with teachers at Thurgood Marshall and a middle school, Gloria R. Davis, that used to be in the Bayview. And I get how families struggled. I had a kid who came back from Christmas and he was not doing well in his classes. His house had burned down. That's real. And that's also symbolic of what has been happening to our systems and what people are trying to dismantle. So when City College was threatened with closure a decade ago, I'd been there for a number of years. And with the Educators Union, I was on the front lines to save the college. But all over the news, this Treasure Community College was blamed. And it took a lawsuit from the city attorney that pointed to other agendas going on. So we understand that public schools are starved and that it's the underfunding here in California that's at the root of a lot of the problems. So, at the school board meetings and in our communities, you hear criticism and it's late into the night. The commissioners, the parents on this call, they get it. That's part of the democratic process. Parents and advocates, want our schools to be better. I work as a legislative aide now to one of San Francisco supervisors, and I've been convening a group of SFUSD parents in our district for over a year. They're focused on the after-school support that working families need, on bringing more resources to the district, on open communication. One serves on the PCAC. They're focused on budget transparency. So they're not out there attacking leaders who are trying to fix these problems. Commissioner Collins mentioned that the recall isn't about us, about them as the leaders, but about what they represent. I've been getting these glossy mailers every day telling us to vote for the recall, and some of them in Chinese. At my son's schools, they've always translated the newsletter into Chinese and Spanish, but that's not why this well-funded campaign wants to turn to communities of color. It's trying to divide us. So, we just celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. on Monday, and we have to remember that part of our shared history is that we have this diverse country in 2022 because of the civil rights movement half a century ago. The civil rights leaders had led the way, pushing on the country's elected officials then to lift the racist immigration quotas that were in place for decades. And that really ushered in a new era of immigration laws and brought the diversity that we have, not just in our schools, but all our communities. So let's unpack this recall. You see all this big money pouring in. 75% of the funding for the recall are donations that are greater than $10,000. The teachers have seen this playbook. Have you ever been to an union rally? They'll call it out. Education is under attack. Stand up, fight back. So my closet poet created a few lines where, the big funders would get together with their own rally, not that they ever have enough people, the 1% never attends rallies, right? They say public schools are targets to attack. Take the school board out the back. We're not gonna let them. And for them, it's not about education, it's about influence, and it's about what money can buy. I know I'm preaching here to the converted, because we know how hard our school board members have worked to ensure that programs are preserved. We worked legislatively on some programs that were bringing 800 SFUSD students to do internships and to work with younger kids this past summer. They were losing their funding. And Commissioner Collins really helped to bring that issue to light. So the city was able to patch up some of that funding this past summer. We understand that our school board is trying to support the teachers, the paras, the counselors, social workers who are doing the jobs day in, day out with our kids. And they're definitely trying to make sure that the schools are safe. All 14,000 of those windows that haven't been working or needed to be tested right during the pandemic. So we need more resources for the district to meet the needs of children and families, and we don't need expensive recalls that cost $3 million. So remember that the school board races are nonpartisan. Commissioners are public servants, and their small stipend doesn't cover anyone's rent check. Maybe it covers a parking space in town, but around the country, we see this concerted effort to attack school board members. Ballotpedia, this nonprofit, tracked school board elections in 463 districts last year. And so where there were sleepy elections, these are now lightning rods, drawing a lot of attention. And the number one issue that has galvanized people in some parts is critical race theory. Without going too much into it, basically this theory acknowledges that we have structural racism in the United States. It's in our criminal justice, it's in our education, our workforce, our housing, and our healthcare systems. And guess which states are banning the teaching of this theory in schools? Among those are Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Iowa, Arizona, South Carolina, North Dakota. And I will say that, you will find parents and families, communities that are progressive in these states, but it's about those elected leaders who are, using these agendas to work against our elected leaders in the school board. So these issues, like critical race theory, aren't specific talking points in this recall, but you do see a larger attempt to disrupt public education. So, if we were all collectively in a room, and I know we're all here all on Zoom, we do a chant the way the educators have. So I say public education is under attack. You say, stand up, fight back. Public education is under attack. Stand up, fight back.
All right, thank you so much, Lee. It is great to have your voice. Thank you so much for your advocacy for public education in so many venues, as a parent in our public schools, and also your work in our community college. And it's very interesting to know the links and the patterns that people engage in when they're trying to undermine public education. So feel free at any point in the program to ask Lee any questions if one comes up. And I will kick it back over to Mari.
Hi, everyone. It's me again. Thanks so much again, Lee. So now we're going to be bringing in Cari Cymanski. And I'm sorry if I messed up your last name. I really am. I hope I did.
No, you did it perfect.
Okay. Who is an amazing SFUE teacher, talk about workers' rights and job quality in the context of these recalls, and is also an SFUSD's parent as well, who has a child who has been dropping off lit, just like my child as well. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Mari, and everyone here. I'm so honored to be speaking for a little bit. I'm an SFUSD teacher. I teach first grade, 6 and 7-year-olds. I also have a first grader. And kind of what I want to start with is, thinking about as a teacher, what do the recallers want? The recallers want to get away from the business of desegregation. Recallers want to get away from the business of facing up to racism and gender exclusion in our schools. And recallers want to get away from centering inclusion of all of our students. And what they want to get back to is the business of centering their own students, which is the old business as usual. These recallers think that educator commissioners are distracted by the work of including and supporting our students with special needs, our students across the gender spectrum, and our students of color. But educators know that's not a distraction. Educators know that's the work. Reflecting our students in our curriculum, on our walls, with our language in our bathrooms, and even on our school buildings is what makes teachers' jobs possible. We can't address whole children in buildings that do not reflect them, and in buildings that do not show their values or even show them in any way. And for teachers, there are things like teacher housing, which is something that Commissioner Maliga has worked on. Teachers, we would like to be paid a little more, sure. All educators, especially our para-educators, and especially our substitute teachers. We're not in crisis because people have disappeared. We're in crisis because nobody is willing to pay a living wage to all educators in this city. And so people working on housing, commissioners who support our unions are important for a number of reasons. But I want to talk about housing for educators. It's really important, right? Because as housing costs here in San Francisco go up and up and up and up, gentrification doesn't not apply to teachers, it applies to teachers as well. And so the chance that students in our schools will have teachers that share their background, who look like them, who share their experience, goes down and down and down, the more expensive the housing gets and the less we refuse to, the less we actually pay teachers. And so that goes straight to the quality of the student experience and the teacher experience. If we can't afford to live here, that's really tough. And if teachers of color, especially, and people not inheriting generational wealth can't afford to live here, then that deteriorates the quality of education for everyone in the system. Teachers aren't really in it for the money. We all know that. We're in it because we love it. And so for us, the fight to really serve all of our students and really include all of our students is the fight for the quality of our experience as teachers. And so, as a teacher who went from being completely overloaded and under-resourced to begin with, then teaching in a pandemic, and going back into schools without adequate masks, without, windows that open. I know, especially Commissioner Collins, Commissioner López, and Commissioner Maliga, we know that they have our back. And recallers would really like teachers to just be quiet and continue doing our jobs. But we're going to have an even bigger teacher crisis if that is what happens, because we need to speak out about having the basics about what it takes to be present, healthy, and ready to teach in a classroom. The last thing I really want to say is that we know that the big money here is interested in charters and privatization, which we know exclude all of the students that Commissioner Collins, Commissioner Maliga, and Commissioner López are working so hard to include. But also we know that our children are not profit centers. They are our most important investment. And I know when I see these particular commissioners fighting for more resources that people who are recallers don't want to give, I know that those commissioners have our backs and have our students' backs, and that's why I'm out here speaking out against the recall.
Thank you again so much, Cari. Amazing. I love always listening to our SFUSD teachers and all that they're going through. Thank you so much for teaching during this pandemic. So does anybody have a response or a question for Cari? I will look really quick right now on the chat. And if you do and we don't get to it right now, Cari can just always message you right there in the chat. There you go. Without ado, thank you again, Cari. No recalls, yes. So we're bringing in our San Francisco School Board President, Gabriela López, who's going to speak about her work with migrant and immigrant families who would be very, very impacted by the recalls. Take it away, Presidente López.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Much of my work has always been around young people and even just being able to hear that and the excitement with our young people. It gives me so much hope. I've been doing this work for over 10 years, specifically as a classroom teacher. And it begins with my experience as a daughter of immigrants from Mexico. Just seeing the inability to connect with my educators, the inability for my parents to connect and communicate with my teachers, and just driving that need for future students to have this experience, this representation, and this connection to their learning. My work has consistently tied in the importance of that, of building with students' families and community members, specifically enhancing language accessibility, which is a key part of my experience growing up and what I've seen throughout our district as a classroom teacher and now commissioner. I have the ability to speak my family's native language, my students' family's native language, and have always translated important information and built that connection. At the start of the pandemic, we recognized in San Francisco the people who were most impacted were our Latinx families, specifically in the area where I lived in the Mission District. So I did a lot of on-the-ground work supporting our Latinx families through a group formed here called the Latino Task Force in response to COVID. And there I was able to hold workshops ranging from social emotional support for families, providing arts activities and ideas to do at home, and helping them understand and engage with the Board of Education. Because there's so much throughout this process of being involved in education that many of us don't get to be a part of. And if that opportunity becomes less and less with the numerous barriers that are in place, that the specific commissioners who are being recalled, myself and my colleagues, have fought this entire time to break down. I provided tech tutorials to be able to navigate our learning platforms while we went through distance learning. I helped parents and students set up their laptops, their Wi-Fi, and really understand how to translate the information within these tools. And we were even able to deliver art supplies to students' homes, provide educational materials twice a week, and just be exactly what a school classroom environment gets to do, which is build within that environment, create community, and be able to build the trust that is so needed, so necessary, especially right now. All of this work stems directly from my work in my Master's of Education program, which included familial ties to our classroom's curriculum. So much of what we've heard tonight, being able to bring those experiences, those stories to life in our classroom as a part of our learning experience. I've done home visits with all of my students. I've been able to learn about our neighborhoods and again, make that connection that we want our students to have when throughout their learning experience in our district. As a commissioner and now president of the board, I've spent my time using those same concepts to ensure there's an ability for people like myself, for people like my family to participate in this entire process. The people I was elected to serve, students, educators, parents, have been fighting to make our educational systems better and finally feeling like they can see themselves as a part of the Board of Education. They are not billionaires. They don't have corporate ties. They want joyful learning experiences for all of our students. And this recall is an opportunity and takeover to take back that progress, the progress we have made as actual educators on the board. And once again, minimize the ability for workers, immigrant families, and young people to participate. So this is a lot of our work has been fighting and with the support of all of us, really being able to push back on what we've known throughout our time, throughout our work, so that money doesn't take over and really direct where our school district will lead.
All right, President López, thank you so much. Do we have, let's see, so there's a question in the chat. I'll let you go ahead and take a look at that, President López and Commissioner Collins, and feel free to ask questions. We really appreciate your leadership on the school board, President López. It's been an amazing year with the pandemic, and you have brought us through. So glad to see you, President, last year and then this year again. I know the board has full confidence in your leadership. Thank you very much. And now we're going to bring in Supervisor Dean Preston from the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, who will talk about the real estate money behind the recalls and the impact that the recalls would have on San Francisco's progressive movement in the short term and medium to long term. We have three amazing school board commissioners, and we're now going to hear from Supervisor Preston why it is so essential and so critical, and there is so much at stake. He'll talk about realtors having an interest in school and the long-term fallout at this and the Chaser recall succeed. Supervisor Preston, welcome. It's great to have you.
Thanks a lot, Brandy. It's good to be here with everyone, and thanks for pulling this together to Our Revolution and the Bernie Kratz and Mari and everyone who's working on this. Really appreciate it. You know, it is, as others have said, it's just such a difficult time for everyone during the last couple years, and just really appreciate all the work everyone's doing, all the educators and school staff and families and students. And it's been so many ups and downs, and it seems like you know, in the context of politics, there's a lot of, I think, revisionist history about what's been going on at the school board in our schools. And you know, I think one thing that's clear to those of us who've worked with these school board commissioners is that they all really share a deep commitment to equity, to our students, to educators, and also in this pandemic to the safety of families and workers in our schools, something that I think kind of gets taken for granted, but you know, but especially with the push around opening and all the criticism of folks for just trying to be safe and careful and protect everyone in a pandemic. So appreciate all of their work. You know, I think in this context, and other speakers have talked about this, right? I mean, we've got real needs in public education in our schools, everything from testing vaccines, you know, dealing with school segregation and inequities, the ongoing attacks on schools, the difficulties of retaining educators, the mental health challenges to everyone right now. And it feels often like really frustrating that we are diverted from devoting ourselves completely to those crucial things and instead have to deal with defending against these kind of attacks, right? And, you know, and folks have alluded to it before, and I won't repeat what's been said, and thank you to everyone who made comments about it, but you got to ask at one level, like, what the hell's going on here with this recall, right? Like, and you know, and I don't think I'm saying anything that different than what others have said. Like, we know there's an agenda. You know, we know that this is a low turnout election, right? So let's be real, that the more progressive folks who are focused on equity in our schools do well in general elections, right? They do well when more people vote. In these kind of special elections, you have lower turnout, and it's far more likely that folks who could never win in a general election will get installed by an appointment of the mayor, and that they can get folks out through a recall. So look at where the money's coming from, right? It's a handful of billionaires. You got Arthur Rock dropping $400,000, for example, right? $400,000, not a public school parent, as far as I know, just someone who somehow woke up one day and decided he's going to drop $400,000 into unseating 3 people of color from the San Francisco school board, right? I mean, it's kind of nuts, right? It's like something out of a bad movie. The California Realtors Association, the fine, upstanding California Realtors Association that revels in delight in funding candidates and fighting against legislation that will stop evictions. I mean, these are the folks that wrote California's Ellis Act, California's Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, the very things that make San Francisco unaffordable and drive working class people out of the city through evictions. That's what the California Realtors Association is all about. They spent gobs of money attacking me when I ran for office, and now we're spending gobs of money. I think they're up at over $50,000 on these mailers. The Chamber of Commerce, you cannot find an entity that is more anti-labor than the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. PG&E, right? Tens of thousands of dollars. Like, do we really have to talk about PG&E? And again, what's PG&E doing? Investing in unseating school board members, right? These folks, you know, these are basically the corporate equivalent of your schoolyard bullies, right? And they use lies and they use money as their weapons of choice in how they pick on folks and how they try to buy elections. So we've got, you know, over $1 million coming in of this kind of money. It is clearly an effort to try to buy an election. It's serious, and I you know, appreciate everyone who's getting out there, knocking doors, dropping lit, because it's a lot of money, right? And money, you know, definitely influences votes. So I think it needs to be taken very seriously. But it's a power grab, and as others have said, it's an attempt to privatize schools, take away power from unions and from progressive leaders, and also trying to appoint folks. And we don't know who will be appointed. We just know that they will be folks who are committed to the agenda that is driving this, and that is an agenda of privatizing schools, of further depriving public schools of resources, and of not addressing racial inequities and segregation in our schools, right? I mean, that's what whoever gets appointed will be, all those things and a friend of the mayor, right? It's a political backroom kind of deal. And, you know, the reality is we have an election coming up in November, you know, and I say this even to the critics, people who have a different opinion of our school board commissioners than I do. It's still like, you know, vote however you want in November, but recalls are different. And recalls of officials, especially officials who are not accused of any corruption, not accused of any gross misconduct, anything like that, but basically just are accused of doing what they said they would do when they ran for office. That's really what this is. And if you reward that, you will see more and more recalls in San Francisco. You're already seeing the recall attempt of Chesa Boudin. There are you looked in Southern California, the recall attempts at Mike Boney, that one just failed in LA. That was because of his advocacy for homeless people, right? Like there is a conservative streak that is using recalls as a way to try to oust people who are progressive from power when they can't win in general elections. So that's what we're up against. I'm totally opposed to these 3 recalls. I think it would make a big statement to defeat these recalls, because look at the money. We've talked about the money, over $1 million supporting recall. What are you at, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 against it? You know, like, but to win, right, to be outspent in that way and win would send such a powerful message that we mean it when we elect progressive leaders, and we don't need a bunch of billionaires and big corporate entities coming in and trying to target low voter turnout opportunities to unseat our elected leaders. So please spread the word. Thanks for having me. I'll stick around, happy to answer any questions, and just appreciate all of you who are fighting against these recalls. Thanks.
All right, so just one quick question for Dean. Why do you think London Breed is supporting these recalls?
You know, London Breed was supporting the lawsuit against the schools earlier with Herrera, which I think was a bad move. I think there's no secret that, you know, she is not aligned with real change and progressive values in San Francisco, and I think she wants folks on the board who are politically aligned with not just her. I don't think it's personally about London Breed. It's London Breed has firmly aligned herself with the billionaires that we're talking about, right? I mean, that's who she is answerable to, works with, and whose agenda she serves. And so I don't think there's a real distinction between London Breed's objectives and, you name them, Arthur Rock, you know, Gary Tan, any of these folks, right? They agree with her more conservative brand of politics, and I think she will appoint folks they will be very happy with if our school board members are ousted. So I think the short answer is all the reasons we've identified of what's behind this, I think are fundamentally consistent with Mayor Breed. And I think a lot of folks are in denial about Mayor Breed's politics, maybe not folks on this call, but you know, when it's not a mistake when she endorsed like Michael Bloomberg for president, right? I mean, these are her values, and folks want London Breed to be a different kind of leader than she is. I think folks want to believe that someone who grew up in public housing in San Francisco would hold different values, and folks, I think, need to just really focus on what she does in office, not what she says. And I think her trying to unseat progressive school board members is consistent with how she's been operating in office.
I agree. Thank you so much for that perspective, Dean, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you at one of our future lit drops. Yes, and I agree. I think those are really important points. Also important to note that Mayor Bloomberg really brought charter schools into New York, and that London Breed unfortunately has a number of direct reports in jail on corruption charges. So thank you so much. Thank you again to all of your speakers tonight. Now I will kick it over to Mari, who is going to give us our call to action. Mari.
Okay. First, I have a quick question. Are we doing the special video surprise right now, or am I doing it after the call to action?
Hey, let's do that for the call to action. We're having some video problems.
Okay, so I'll do the call to action, and then we have a special video surprise for you all. So anyway, so thank you, everyone. All right, we've heard a lot of good talking points here tonight, and a lot of folks who are directly experiencing the negative impact of these recalls, which a lot of you who are on the call as well, who are in the chat, are all chiming in as well. We're all being impacted by the negative impact of these recalls. Now, if you agree that we cannot allow these school board recalls to continue, please, 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 please take a stand with us. There's something that everyone can do to lend a hand and make sure that folks vote no on the recalls. So whether it's making phone calls, a text bake, doing a lit drop this weekend, we have childcare there. We can plug you in with a way to help. So we want you to go to this link. It should be showing up. Someone should be putting in the chat if it's not already in the chat. So we want you to show up at that link, and we want you to sign up. And we want you to do either a lid drop, whether you want to hang up a window sign, maybe you want to donate. Please donate. Again, you saw that we are being outspent by over $1.1 million. We are a grassroots, people-powered campaign of SFUSD parents, SFUSD educators, SFUSD alumni. So is that chat is it being dropped in the chat now? Let's see. It will be dropped in the chat if it is not right now. There we go. Several times. There we go. Thank you. And so let me see. Are we ready for our special surprise for everyone?
Hey, let's do our chant, and then it's gonna take a second to get it loaded up. We have a special video we wanted to show, but we're having some video problems, so we'll have to end the call and try to hold on, and we'll come right back with our special video.
Okay, so Brandy, I'm gonna kick it to you for your very final thoughts since you were my co-host. Thank you for co-hosting with me as well.
All right. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, Monty. Thank you so much. So just want to thank all of you for spending time with us and being so proactive in this fight. This is how we make change. This is how we show love to our communities. So just a reminder of the link to sign up. Everyone should be signing up. Just to, we'll get back to you and kind of match you up with whatever your interest is, and donate to the school board recalls campaign, and sign up also to be a member of Our Revolution. We are so grateful to Our Revolution staff or the organization. We could not have done this really without their help. So please become a member. I'm a member. It's definitely worth it. It's wonderful to be a part of San Francisco Bernie-crats, but also to be a part of something larger is fantastic. Thank you so much. And Mari, I'm going to send it back to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. So we're going to do our chants, and then we're going to do the video. Are we doing the video and then the chant? Someone tell me.
Let's do the chant first, and then we'll get the video up and going. But it might be a little sloppy here.
It's okay. So I have two chants for you all. So the first chant we're gonna do is the Our Revolution one, and so you can unmute yourself. And I'm gonna say when we organize, you're gonna say we win, and I'm gonna say when we organize, you're gonna say we win. When we organize,
we win.
When we organize,
we win.
When we organize,
we
win.
Now our second chant is a chant that I made up with my baby the other day. And so it's gonna go into no recall chant. So it's gonna be vote no on ABC if you care about democracy. So I'm gonna say vote no on ABC, and you're gonna say if you care about democracy. So vote no on ABC.
If you care about democracy.
Vote no on ABC.
If you care about democracy.
No on ABC.
If you care about democracy.
Vote no on ABC. What? If you
care about democracy.
Last time. Vote no on ABC. If you care about
democracy.
Thank you so much. And we have a very, 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 very special video message. Do we have that video message ready? This is a very special person. This person has been a huge, huge, huge supporter of no recalls, but is an elder, so is staying mainly at home, but is super, super active online. Every time he can get an opportunity, he's like, no recalls everywhere. And he made a special video message just for us, and no one has ever seen it. We have not put it on social media at all, so we're all gonna watch it now together, and then we'll watch another. Then I will upload it later. Okay, let's go. Let's see our special video message. Put in the chat who you think this is. I don't think anyone can hear it. If the special video message cannot be shown today, I promise we will post it on our No Recalls Facebook page. Can someone please put it in the chat, our No Recalls Facebook link? But Tom Amiano really wanted
Amiano, and I am opposing the recall of the board members, not because I think everyone is perfect, but I think I have some street cred. You know, I'm a parent, a grandparent. The kids went to all public schools in San Francisco. I taught school for 28 years. I was on the school board. So I think I have a good grasp of the dynamic of the school district. Elections are meant to express support or opposition. A recall like this is going to disappoint everybody, even the critics. It'll result in dysfunction and more disruption than we need, especially during COVID. And I'm going to put my own 2 cents in. I think a more responsible school board would also be helpful to that if people had that as their full-time job. In other words, I think eventually we should look at salary and benefits for school board members like they have in other districts, LA, so that it's not just staff-ridden or a part-time job, but a full-time job. Vote no on the recall. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom Amiano, one of our major supporters, and amazing queer elder here in San Francisco. So thank you again, everyone. When we organize, we what? We win.
We win.
We organize, we
win.
Exactly. Please take the energy. Please sign up. We need your support. The only way we will win is through people power and organizing and pounding that pavement. We look forward to see you this weekend at our Lit Drop, Saturday and Sunday, 11 a.m. at Parque de Niños. We will be there and we will have childcare and possibly even snacks, but definitely a smile. Thank you so much. Peace.